let's take a little trip to Death Valley, guys.
Hey friends, this is Brandon Spain, and you're listening to the Unrefined Podcast, where we unravel mysteries, share perspectives, and navigate the rich landscapes of the seen and unseen together. We would love for you to connect with us on social media. You can find those links and how to subscribe to our members-only exclusive portal by visiting unrefinedpodcast.com. Now, for this week's episode. All right. We are back for a new episode of our series that we've been doing here of the Mojave Mysteries, which is exploring all things Death Valley, Mojave, Nevada Desert, Area 51, portals, all kinds of neat stuff. So you have a really special treat today. All three of us are taking three different stories, and we're going to talk about them and show, are they normal or super normal? The whole paranormal experience. Guys, we have BT and Lindsy in the house. How are y'all doing?
Good.
Doing well, man.
Yeah. I'm real excited about this. I like it when we do these episodes with just the three of us sometimes. I like guests too, but it's just a lot of fun, just us talking. And even though some of them are kind of sad, this is kind of a fun podcast versus dealing with, the one world government or occult or yes. So. But anyway, I'm going to tackle the story of the great Gram Parsons. He is a musician, and perhaps a lot of you that are Gen X and older have heard of some of the things that we're going to talk about with him. But Gram Parsons was a musician. Gram Parsons was part of the Byrds, and he transitioned the Byrds to more of a country rock sound. I forget the exact song that he did, but it was one of their hits that really pushed them into that genre. And then the Eagles came out, and then a lot of the Flying Burrito Brothers and all that, which Gram Parsons was also part of the Flying Burrito Brothers. And he also went solo, and then that leads into our story. So what's really interesting, I just want to bring this up because this harkens back to Laurel Canyon, is his father was in the military. That was another interesting. So that we'll just throw that out there just to leave it sitting there. I don't always know what to make about those kind of things, but could have a possibility with what was going on. There is tons of deep rock and roll, paranormal experiences and personal hauntings with Gram Parsons. He started his work out, like I said, with the Byrds, and then he did his solo work. He died at age 26, which is, he was only like a few months shy of being part of the 27 Club, which is another interesting fact that I pulled out. It was just fascinating. But anyway, it was in 1973. He loved Joshua Tree. He was one of the first ones that would go out there, and he just felt peace, and there's no telling. And he probably identified with a lot of the occultic energy or the paranormal energy that is in that whole sector of the Mojave. And that's where he died. And the interesting story about him, this is what cracks me up, is he has an interesting story before he dies and then an interesting story after he dies. So big, heavy drug user, got into alcohol and heroin. And he had a friend out there that he met at this inn. It's called the Joshua Tree Inn, which is now, it still exists. And I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. But and so they just partied out there, and his friend that he's with, she gave him morphine, which is really not what you should be doing with alcohol. And he was kind of out of it. And then some of his other friends, I think it was two rock stars, which interestingly enough, too, I want to bring this out. That's really important is he has a tie. He had a really strong relationship with Keith Richards and the Stones. So he had a tie with the Rolling Stones as well. Yeah. See, you guys, it's all connected. It's just amazing.
Where the Stones are, the sketch isn't far.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, I like some of their songs. It's like I'm getting to where I can't even listen to them. With Sympathy on the Devil, of the Devil, or For the Devil comes on the radio, I turn stations. I just can't even listen to that song anymore. But anyway, so his manager was a guy named Phil Kaufman, And I think he was there at this whole thing. And what ended up happening is Graham was really, really struggling. So the person who was with him, I don't remember her name. I think it's inconsequential. She wasn't famous. She went to get some food and stuff. And they said, watch Graham. Well, come to find out, he went in respiratory failure from the morphine, which people don't realize that's what opioids and stuff do. You go in respiratory failure. And he died, 26, drug overdose. And just in the prime of his career, like most of the 27 Club. He was just now starting to get out there. And his solo album is awesome. I recommend you listen to it on Spotify. It's just an incredible album. But this is what's crazy. Supposedly, earlier, they had another friend that had passed away. I think it was a member of the Byrds. Yeah, it was. It was a member of the Byrds. And Graham and Phil Kaufman were talking just at a cafe or something in Los Angeles, and they were talking about how this guy from the Byrds had this big Roman Catholic nothing against Roman Catholic, but they had this big Roman Catholic funeral and mass and stuff, and they were just like, "Hey, I don't want to be. I just want to be cremated and thrown out in the Joshua Tree Desert." Okay, well, Phil Kaufman remembered that discussion because after Graham died, him and another guy pulled up in a hearse in their cowboy rhinestone jacket and their cowboy hats and grabbed his body from the Los Angeles airport, drove him to Joshua Tree, lit him on fire in his casket, had cremated him out in the middle of the desert.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. It's just so wild. It's like, that's one of the weirdest parts of this whole story. And I didn't know about that part. So anyway, they got charged with some kind of possession, stealing a dead body and all this kind of stuff. And they didn't get major time or anything like that. But Phil Kaufman, to this day, he wrote a memoir and he talked about that event. And he swears up and down that Graham, of course, his family disagreed. So he's buried in New Orleans now, which is ironic. It's really weird. I don't even think he was from New Orleans, but he's buried down in New Orleans somewhere. But after all this happened, I mean, this was room number 8. And after all this happened, he began to visit room number 8. He was a restless spirit, what we would call in paranormal circles like an unquieted spirit, I guess is what we would call it. Mm-hmm. And so even now to this day, in the Joshua Tree Inn, they don't rent out room number 8 because they don't want to freak people out. You have to ask for it if you're a fan, if you want to do the whole paranormal experience. Mm-hmm. And there's been tons of just interesting things that have happened. One of the coolest ones was him. It was a story of him sitting in there, and a guest saw him sitting in there talking about, I really wish I could go back and redo some of my albums and finish out my career. And he was talking to somebody, and the person, of course, was flabbergasted at first.
Right.
Who is this in our room? Because they didn't know it was Gram Parsons. And then they realized later it was Gram Parsons by the content of what he was talking about and stuff like that. And he wasn't the type of dead that sometimes people will see ghosts or the dead and they'll be doing something and they act like you're not even there, like you're not even present. This one interacted with the guy and actually told him a phrase and stuff, which is extremely rare in paranormal type circles. And I suspect that he was given more probably electromagnetic energy. That's the science part of me, because of the place where it's at, which is where they have all the different ley lines come out of this area. If you look at a map of the ley lines in the United States, I did this when we did our Laurel Canyon series, and they ran through Laurel Canyon, but they all came out of Nevada. It's crazy. In Nevada and what's below it? Arizona? Yeah, Arizona. And so it's really interesting that these ley lines it's like a hotbed or a center. And I think Sedona is a huge place, and I think that's where a lot of them originate, which isn't in Arizona, I think. But does the Mojave, can y'all answer this for me? Does the Mojave run out of Nevada into Arizona? Is that whole area the Mojave Desert? It's just in Nevada?
Nevada and California.
I thought it was just
in California?
California, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it goes west. All right. That's cool. But what fascinates me about this is the whole concept of the intrigue coming up. It was almost like, all right, hear what I'm saying, because I thought about this when I was reading. He was the first Burning Man.
Ha! Wow.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing that's really interesting. They just take his body out to the middle of nowhere highway.
Yeah.
Light his body on fire.
In the coffin. In the coffin. Yeah, I mean,
just
they
burn the whole thing to bit. So they moved the rest of his skeletal remains, I'm assuming, back to New Orleans.
Back to New Orleans. It's just crazy. And his ghost is, what would you call it? A peaceful ghost or a non-confrontational
well, it's not knocking things around, right? I mean, we're not.
Yeah. It's always, And, it could be a demon. I don't think so. Not judging by its behavior. And we're not demon in the gaps type people.
Right.
I mean, I do allow for a lot of some spiritual hauntings to be demonic. I don't rule that out, but I'm not the one or persuasion where everyone is. I'm beginning to think that a lot of them aren't demonic, that the demonic part is smaller.
Yeah. Do we have anything that you said, the phrase that he told the guy or said to him?
Let me look through my notes here. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but it was really
fine, but yeah, I had to ask.
Well, one of the things that I'm finding really interesting, if we're talking about ghosts, and specifically the kinds of things this individual, this particular spectral entity says, there are studies and research ongoing that may include that these are basically highly charged or energized recordings of a person. So basically, we've got Gram in room number 8 at the Joshua Tree Inn.
Yeah.
And he's talking to somebody about this very problem, this very thing of wanting to redo some of his songs or whatever he wants to do, or re-record or make better some of his music. And there could have very well have been a high amount of electromagnetic interference or activity within the inn to record this conversation that just plays back.
Yeah,
when the circumstances are right. That's ongoing research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that actually, believe it or not, borders into science. I think a lot of that, Lindsay and I can't remember the phrase. We kind of coined a phrase like a quantum appearance, sort of. It's almost like it's a quantum recording that plays. I remember back in the 80s, there's a show called That's Incredible. I don't know if y'all remember that show. Y'all might have saw the reruns, but they would have all these fun things, and they did a paranormal one time. And this one professor was saying that he believed a lot of old buildings recorded voices and stuff like a record player does acoustically. Right. And then when the right conditions happened, they were released. And so I don't know if it's that, but as much as...
Well, I mean, there's another theory that's kind of gaining traction too, is moments of time being concurrent. And so if you kind of think of like time being stacked, one event on top of another through an area, and sometimes one of these stacks of paper can see into another time dimension. And that could also be a potential thing of going on, is somebody's basically sitting there and they're experiencing their particular moment in time and the moment in time in which Gram is talking to somebody about this. And so it's kind of like, well, you know, if Gram is completely strung out or not during this moment in time, maybe he saw the people who are listening to him there as ghosts. I mean, there's all these stories of people saying, hey, I saw a ghost way back here in this time period, and they were dressed really funny, kind of out of place. And you look and you read this, and somebody in the 1800s talking about a ghost that looks like they're dressed in the zoot suit era.
60s, 70s, yep.
This is the 20s. 1800s, seeing somebody in the 1920s. So, I mean, and then or other directions. And so you have all these like weird time dilation events that could be part of this theory. And I think it's coined by Mike Ricksecker, the stacked time theory.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I don't have a problem with quantum. There's a lot of people out there that think quantum is of the devil and all that kind of stuff. I mean,
sure.
I think the devil can use it just like he can use AI.
Yeah.
But I think quantum is part of how the universe is set up. It's how God's created it. And I think we're going to discover a lot of things that are supernatural that were scientifically backed, but that doesn't make them any less supernatural.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, but this was just a fascinating story. I'm not going to go into a lot of the different sightings and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
I printed up something, had a bunch of them, but I'm still trying to find that one with the where he said what he said. But I'll look through my stuff while whoever goes next goes, and I'll see if I can get it by the end of the podcast here. All right, Mr. Waters.
Yeah, well, let's take a little trip to Death Valley, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Discuss a group of people who have gotten the name Death Valley Germans. Yeah, this was kind of this is a sad story. This is a lot like the Kenny Veach. The Gram Parsons story is kind of sad too. A little bit of Belushi vibes there with the leaving him alone with a woman who administers dope. But
yes, I thought the same thing. Yep.
This is sad in a different way, and as we'll see, it could just be poor choices led to this. But there's some strange things here, I think, and some unanswered questions. So
yeah.
All right. July of 1996. 4 people from Dresden, Germany, 34-year-old Egbert Remkes and his girlfriend Cornelia, and she went by Connie Meyer, who was 27, along with each of them had a child from a previous relationship. Egbert's son, George Weber, was 11, was there. And Connie's little boy, 4-year-old boy, Max Meyer, was there as well. So 2 adults and 2 children decide to take a trip to the States, and particularly kind of the California and Southern California and Las Vegas. So this was in July of 96, and they rented a 96 Plymouth Voyager. I remember that because my mom had a Plymouth Voyager around that time.
Now, what year is this again? 90 what?
96.
96. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they, for whatever reason, they decided after being in Vegas, Egbert had tried to wire his ex-wife, actually, who he still had a pretty good relationship, for money, but didn't get it. And he was in Vegas, so you don't have to imagine why he needed money. He may have been doing some gambling there. But anyway, at some point they wanted to go to Death Valley. I don't know, maybe they had read about the Manson family, or just, it's an interesting place, especially in Inyo County, where the Badwater Basin is. That's the lowest point in the United States.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
In the same county, you've also got, or at least bordering on it, not the highest point in the United States, but Mount Whitney is the highest point in the lower 48, not far from there.
Oh, wow.
County. So you got the heights and the depths there. I don't know. It still seems a little bit of an odd place. I don't know much about what Germans and what they're into, but it seems like an odd place to me for people to want to vacation or check out. But yeah, Egbert had his heart set on going to Death Valley for some reason. And so around the 22nd, they take off to the Death Valley area. They stop at a visitor center there and get some German language resources. This minivan was 2-wheel drive. First poor choice.
Yep.
For going into Death Valley. Vehicles of this sort are banned. They didn't know this. Were banned in some of the areas they were driving in. Obviously, they had no one to enforce that because they did it anyway. Egbert and his girlfriend and the 2 kids, they stop at some point at the geologist cabin near Warm Springs and actually sign the guest book and write their names. And they actually write it in German. So I don't know what their English language ability was, but for whatever reason, they wrote, "We're going to cross the pass." And this is the last record we have of them.
Okay.
At this cabin, and called the geologist cabin. And it was stocked. So people were regularly seeing to this place. So it would have been a place they could have gone back to at some point, as you'll see later. There was water and food there, but for whatever reason, they took a different route. So yeah, their plan was probably to take Mingle Pass. Now, Mingle Pass would have taken them through Goler Wash, which is where the Barker Ranch is located. Barker Ranch being the kind of the second headquarters to the Manson family.
Yep.
And part of the speculation when they finally went was that, hey, maybe there's still some Mansonites out there and they killed them, or some other weird cult. But anyway, they're not heard from again. No one calls attention to them till later on that month because, they were supposed to catch a flight back like the 27th to Germany, and Egbert's ex-wife and mother of his son was like, hey, they never showed up. So they alert the authorities and they start to search. The minivan wasn't found until October of that month.
Oh, wow.
So it just tells you just the distances and how hard it is. And just, people don't go out to these places. It was found near Anvil Canyon, east of Willow Spring.
Was it way off the beaten path? I mean, was it on, or is it just located somewhere weird?
Well, it was located in an extremely remote part of the park, but what does that mean?
Yeah, right. I mean, everywhere's remote.
So yeah, it had to have been really off the beaten path. And again, he's riding a 2-wheel drive vehicle that it had 3 busted tires when they found it. I mean, so, but no trace of them until 2009, when 2 hikers and 2 search and rescue guys, Les Walker and Tom Mahood, November 12th, 2009, finally found some skeletal remains. Now, the skeletal remains, so far as they could tell, were only of the adults. And the only one that could be linked DNA-wise was Egbert Remkes. His DNA was matched with some of the skeletal remains. So yeah, they found Connie's passport. So they just assumed, yeah, this got to be her. But again, the children's remains weren't found at all. And okay, so Tom Mahood, however you pronounce his name, looked at this years later and thought, well, there's a naval base to the south there. Maybe this Egbert guy headed in that direction. Now, this naval base is near China Lake. Apparently, there were Chinese immigrants who mined something there at some point. Yeah, there's a naval base to the south, and this naval base is interesting because it is partially administered by Edwards Air Force Base, which also administers Area 51 in Nevada.
Yep.
That was interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, China Lake is it's another one of those dry lake beds.
Yeah.
So it's part of the Naval Air Weapons Station, China Lake.
That's it. Naval Air Weapons Base. Yeah. Tom Mahood speculated that, well, maybe if he looked at the map and saw that there was a naval base, in Germany, military bases have lots of personnel there. They have huge walls there. And he figured if we get anywhere close to it, they'll come find us. And, but he may have misjudged distances. He may have thought it was like 9 miles away.
Yeah. And it could have way further away than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. They could have doubled back just 4 miles, somewhat uphill, but back to that cabin, which again had supplies that they could have rationed. And if they put supplies there, then that meant somebody came there regularly and just could have. I would have thought they would have taken their chances there, but for whatever reason, now Egbert, by all accounts, was kind of a tinfoil hatter, kindred spirit.
Interesting.
And was into the paranormal and weird tech and things like that. And some speculation is he wanted to go there and see if he could see something weird. Maybe he thought it was like Area 51 or something.
Yeah.
And who knows if it isn't. I
Yep.
don't trust anything that connected to Edwards Air Force Base, but the adult remains there are almost certainly Egbert and Connie. Again, the kids' remains weren't found. And why did they head this way instead of going back to that cabin? So, there's a lot of weirdness. We got the Manson connection here with so close to Barker Ranch. And who knows what booger bears may have been involved in this. Hey, maybe they were deceived by sinister forces to head in the wrong direction. But, it's also likely that this is just a very tragic story of a guy who was irresponsible and didn't prepare. And man, I can't imagine watching those kids. I would want to go first.
Yeah.
But then you had to worry about your kids being there without you. I mean, there's a no-win situation for them. Some of the speculation of the kids not being found was that maybe they died first and they buried them somewhere, but this guy didn't know. I mean, I'm guessing whatever burial they made would have been easy to find.
Oh, yeah.
Then again, they didn't find them for over a decade. So, sad story with some weird connections there. You got the Manson connection. We got the military base down there.
Yeah.
And
with the children disappearing, that makes me lean more towards the military connection. Trafficking. Hey, we don't know. They could have been picked up by a cartel too.
Yeah,
and killed by a cartel,
especially out there.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's cartel territory. It really is. So, yeah, that's another. So I guess you just kind of leave it as like it could be. Occam's razor says they just got lost, whatever. But see, the kids being missing. I would not let my kids get any. If I was lost, they would not go anywhere where I could not see them.
Right.
Well, there were different explanations. I don't know the desert, but they were unsatisfactory to me. Well, kids' remains are easier to carry off and scatter the pack rats. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, how come they found some of the adult remains then and none of the kids? That seems odd to me.
That seems odd to me too. Yeah.
So yeah.
But that would be a good debunk. If I was trying to debunk it, I would say that kids could be taken away by even a coyote, maybe, depending on the size of the child.
And apparently they have found some skeletal remains in pack rat nests around there, but I don't know. Nothing that could be linked to the kids, though.
Pack rats out there must be pretty big.
Yeah, they did. They also found a shoe, a tennis shoe, but they're not sure if it belonged to Connie. I guess she was kind of a petite woman, or the 11-year-old, or George, the 11-year-old boy. So again, nothing related to the kids. I thought this was interesting. They did find some of the places where Egbert must have sat to kind of view the land, and he drank some Bud Ice. So tragic.
Okay.
Tragic beer choice on top of all this tragic.
Bud Ice was popular once.
Yeah, well, at least it wasn't Bud Light.
With really good beer and drank the nastiest beer he could find. But
I know. It's like, this is the best American beer here.
I don't know. But yeah, I'm trying to bring some humor to this.
He wanted a side of water with his hops, I guess.
He wanted to be hydrated.
Yeah.
Rehydrate, Bud Ice.
Yep. Well, yeah, and they found some bourbon and a bottle of wine there, too. Some people think maybe they emptied them and used them to carry water. That's possible.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, tragic, weird stuff, unanswered questions, and again, we're in the Mojave Desert. So
exactly. That's what I want to bring out there. Anything is possible in the Mojave Desert. Yeah. So
and we can't just, I mean, come on, guys. You know, we're not just going to bring something on here and just, nothing, no woo-woo, just as is. That's not us.
I'm going to give you some woo-woo with my story.
Okay.
But we won't, we want to be skeptical and debunk it if possible. Yeah. However, we are open to the supernatural and the woo-woo. And if that's an option, then it needs to be put out there that it's an option.
Yeah. So, in the Denzians that live in the Mojave Desert, I come across one that's notoriously known as the Yucca Man. He's also been called the Mojave Sandman and a handful of other names. And absolutely an interesting entity and creature, things, sighting. But the oddest part is looking at stories, and they're usually always the same. And this is kind of where a lot of my attention was drawn, and reading these tales and seeing that there's all these similarities. It's basically like you've got a Marine private standing outside, or an Army private or something standing gate guard duty at the entrance to a military base. Or we've got Air Force Base like Edwards, and we mentioned the naval base down there, the naval weapons base. I mean, we've got bases all over the dry lake bed area, Area 51, etc. But you got this guy, he's standing there gate duty, and he sees glowing red eyes a distance away. He gets an uneasy feeling. He hears like a growl or a grumph or some kind of sound. He draws his weapon, and whatever he saw is gone, and just to reappear and make a noise to his right, goes around him to the left, and it's just freaking this guy out. One story has this soldier, when he was found unconscious from fainting spell, and when they brought him back to, he recounted this whole story, how he saw this big 7-foot tall thing, red fiery eyes, stunk to high heaven. He said it was hairy all over, and it kept getting really close to him, making a noise, and then it would dart away faster than he could see it, to the point where basically his brain just said, "Oh, I'm on shutdown mode," and he passed out. But you start looking at this, and remember during our Laurel Canyon series, where we were talking about the area where Laurel Canyon was, it was considered a sacred area to the Tongva people.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk about them again, because these guys are living around a river, the Santa Ana River, called Devil's Hideout. And it's east of the San Bernardino Mountains.
Interesting name.
Right. And there's a place called the Cap of the Taquis. And I'm mispronouncing that, but it's an indigenous word to describe what these entities are. They call them the Taquis or the Taquis, and they played this role sometimes in creation stories, specifically in the Chahula peoples. And other cultures recount this entity being like an omen or a sign of good or bad fortune.
Right.
And there's even people who believe that this Mojave Sandman was one of the first or the first shaman in America. And it was what taught other people these shaman ideas. And one of the other things associated with this is not only is it seen and described as, well, what we would say Bigfoot, right? And this thing is classically described as the Bigfoot in the Pat Gimli film. This is exactly what people are seeing, right? They're seeing Bigfoot. And some of the people, the Tongva people, have recorded seeing this hairy man, and then at the same time seeing a large green fireball moving throughout the sky.
Like St. Elmo's fire type thing?
I don't know about like St. Elmo's fire. I'm thinking more along the lines of orbs, a light orb.
Okay.
That's associated with a lot of Bigfoot sightings that we have to this day, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And all of these sightings continue. I mean, there was a place, 9 Mile Canyon, right? Was an area, 9 Mile Canyon. And sightings of the Yucca Man became so endemic that it nearly shut down this new development in Palmdale.
What time period was this?
In the 70s. This is in the 70s.
Okay,
right?
Okay. Yeah.
But always like the strangest stuff always comes from like the Air Force Base themselves, right? So Edwards Air Force Base, for people who don't know, was the place that whatever was covered at Roswell, New Mexico, Aurora, was brought to Edwards Air Force Base first,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the recovered stuff was brought there, and that's already woo. But this is where a lot of personnel who have the technology to keep things like aircraft, especially something like that in Roswell, secret. These are people, they know exactly how to keep everything going.
Yep.
They have high-tech cameras that record in all visible spectrums, all spectrums from infrared to ultraviolet. And so they're able to, and infrared, ultraviolet, et cetera, all the way to record any kind of anything being in an area. I mean, this is like the most advanced. And so we look at somebody, Bobby Ann Slate is one of the biggest Bigfoot investigators. And they talk about getting these reports from policemen who are patrolling an area. And specifically, there's a place near Edwards Air Force Base known as the Sled Track. And these are grooves cut in the ground because of Jack Parsons and him always bringing rockets to this particular area to test off his bombs, man.
More woo.
So it's like, I'm looking at, look, all I did was I just wanted to look at Yucca Man, and I wanted to look at some kind of supernatural creature or something that's going on or some kind of ghost story. And no, I find Laurel Canyon and Jack Parsons.
Yeah.
Me too.
And it's just deep in here. And so this is not just that. This is also where Nazis during Operation Paperclip experimented on other rocketry that they were working on. And so the story goes, this is from a policeman. He says he was heading back to the main base, and he noticed maybe 200 to 300 yards off to his left, these large blue eyes. I do a lot of nighttime hunting, and it was strange. They were larger than anything I'd seen before. The blue eyes had to be about 4 inches apart, 7 feet off the ground.
Oh my gosh.
I stopped the truck, and they're blue. In this story, they're blue.
Wow.
He says, I stopped the truck, and I sat there watching them. It was too dark to see any body shape to whatever this was. The blue glow continued to proceed towards my truck at a right angle for about 100 yards and then stopped. This guy, his name is Sergeant House, and he says an overpowering stench filled the desert air.
Yeah,
he saw these huge blue eyes 50 yards away now, and the movement of the eyes was extremely fast, right? So he would watch, because all he could see is the glowing blue eyes, and they just move, and they're 7 feet, and they just move. This is all he can see. The thing that bothered him the most is they didn't bob up and down, right? This is not somebody walking, because when we walk, we have this. It was just like two lights on a wire moving from one point to another, is how he describes it. He gets a radio call that basically summons him, and he uses that as the excuse to just drive off. And that's exactly what he did. Well, when he gets back to HQ, he has to file a report. This is a normal police procedure. He has to file a report. He files it. Mm-hmm. Well, he's teased and nonstop harassed. But this is the thing is these kinds of encounters didn't stop at all. And in fact, it wasn't until 2009, there's that 2009 again, Lindsay.
Oh, wow.
That then Edwards Air Force Base would officially recognize and acknowledge the incidents with what they call old blue eyes and other strange phenomena in this area. And so basically what we know about it is we have this story from people who are covering basically it's a newsletter. It's a newsletter from Edwards Air Force Base. It's called Inside Edwards. And people outside can actually subscribe to this newsletter. And the article is known as has this article known as Blue Eyes, and it was discussed heavily at a reunion of the 6510th Air Force Police Squadron, who worked between 73 and 79, known as the Desert Rats. So in the newsletter, you can read the newsletter. It says that attendees traded memories of their bizarre experiences on patrol, such as seeing old blue eyes. They called him Yeti. They called him Bigfoot. They called him Yucca Man. They also called him Marvin of the Mojave. Marvin of the Mojave, right? I mean, come on, Looney Tunes, Marvin the Martian.
Marvin
right?
Yeah,
exactly what I thought.
Exactly.
Too.
Yeah, me too.
And so all the reports, they say, look, these guys call it a ghost. They call it a ghost that could not be seen or heard, but left a size 10 sneaker imprint in the sand. Well, not only did they see this, they also see things like observing unexplainable objects in the skies, seeing and disappearing lights, etc. I mean, this would be pretty common sightings over the lake beds down in
around
the area
Air Force Base.
51 Edwards Force.
Yeah.
They are definitely unidentified aerial phenomena, whatever they are. And the most important thing is to show that when we have stories of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, we also get stories of orbs or lights.
Yes.
That seems to play hand in hand with these, but it just doesn't in modern times, guys. This stuff goes all the way back to some of the earliest Spanish colonial era in the California, Nevada area, talking about hairy monsters.
And the natives too, right? The natives,
right? Exactly. That's what I spoke about. Yeah, the indigenous people like the Tongva believed that these people, if you saw one, it was an omen, either good or bad, depending on probably the color of the sky.
Was it Devil's Hideout? I mean,
yeah, this is the area we call it.
Yeah,
Devil's
Hideout.
Call it
that. Okay.
Yeah, we have a tendency to call things devil something around. I mean, there in Mississippi, you've got something that's similar to that.
Yeah,
with the mounds.
Yeah,
I mean, but these are all just parts of these stories that forest rangers talk about. People who patrol the highways talk about. There was even this. See, this is the other thing that might be tied into it. Somebody said that they saw a winged beast fly over someone's house.
Wow.
And so it's like these hairy monsters and this winged lake beast are seen usually assaulting ranchers. And they typically are kind of teed off that there is something coming or something there with the vile stench in the air. And it's
are there mutilations there? I'm sorry.
Animal mutilations? Probably. I didn't start digging in further and deeper because once again, it's like I'm looking for Yucca Man.
Yeah.
I'm looking for something that's described either as a ghost or as a huge hair-covered humanoid.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding is I'm not just finding that. I'm finding stories of things they call Owlman or Mothman in the area. There's a cement monster from an area that used to make cement out in the Mojave Desert.
And it's described Skinwalker Ranch out there.
I found Bigfoot Ranch is what I found.
Yeah. That's cool.
These are all up and down. Anyone who drives up what's Highway 14 or Highway 18.
Yeah.
What is that? With the west, that'll be the west side of the Mojave up to Bear Lake, Big Bear Lake. You'll drive past areas like the old cement mine, and there's reports of this. It's everywhere. U.S. Marines are talking about. They'll go on snow trips, skiing trips in the mountains, and they'll come and they'll talk about seeing the blue glowing eyes or the red glowing eyes. And
all right, well, I have a question.
Yeah.
All right, if we want to explore this from a biblical worldview, what possibly could these creatures be?
Well, definitely not Esau.
Yeah.
But definitely not descended from Esau's family line. What would we call something like this from a biblical perspective? A lot of individuals would talk about how Bigfoots are descended from some kind of Nephilim entity, right?
Yeah.
Some embodied Nephilim, right? Because as we know in Genesis, it says they were Nephilim in those days and after, right? And the question is always, well, how'd they survive? Well, maybe they found their way into caves that they sealed up. And as we continue to dig in the world, we find massive chambers in like India and America and places that, yes, if you had a hermetically sealable way of sealing stone, you could definitely survive in an area for a number of years. Yeah. Because how long did the flood last?
40 days, right? Well, no, it was 40 days rain. Oh. And then it was how many days did it take to go down with?
I mean, even if we just say it took 6 months, right? From beginning to end, which is insane.
Yeah.
To do that much water in 6 months. You can reasonably survive in a cavernous system with plenty of air.
Yep.
And there's also evidence that shows there's biological creatures that can turn CO2 into oxygen, that live off of it, that basically breathe CO2 and its gas is oxygen. So it's kind of like an area that is a recyclable hive for people to live. Well, people, creatures, entities, things that may have been made during the era of the fallen watchers, because it wasn't just humans they sinned against. It wasn't just human wives they took. There's reports that they maybe took animals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, bestiality. Yeah.
Other people would say these could be descended from the line of Cain. I also don't buy that, because once again, the line of Cain would have been wiped out during the flood, because that's pre-flood family lines. But post-flood family lines, you would have Esau, and it's like, well, Esau's never described as a 7-foot tall man, and his children are never described that way, but he was hairy.
Mm-hmm.
So are a lot of Germans.
Italians.
And Italians. I mean, come on. It's not that far of a stretch to say that some people are hairier than other people, but there's no ways to say that Esau's a Bigfoot, because that's not how he's described, and that's not how he interacts with Jacob. And there's no grunting going on. There's no throwing of big old stones and boulders. And so it just seems an illogical jump for me.
Yeah.
But if I was to say something, I'm not going to say that they're demons. There's definitely something epiphenomenal about them. They are not normal.
Yeah. Supranatural, so to speak, is what I like to use. Yeah. And this all goes back to round this up today. It goes back to the Mojave. It goes back to what we started out talking about. Is this is a thin space, or a portal space, or a space where the dimension that we don't see, the unseen, is very thin with the seen. And it's really interesting that the different places in the world that are like that. I did a podcast this morning, and the gentlemen were talking about how graveyards, the reason why people in churches, and this is a 2000 church tradition, even before the split, Protestantism, is you buried your people toward the graveyard because there was this realization that the dead were still in continuity with us, the communion of saints. Right. We've lost that. And so, anyway, going back to what I'm saying, it's not a coincidence that when and you kind of mentioned this earlier, when you find Bigfoot, you find UAPs, you find portals, you find paranormal experiences of ghosts, etc., just to name it. And in this area is just a huge vortex or hotbed of all this kind of stuff. And Area 51, there it is, right there in the middle of it, doing who knows what. We don't know. So
yeah, something else that's important was when we were talking about Gram Parsons, his surviving daughter Polly had to grow up with that, and had to grow up with exactly what it was that killed her father. And she has established and continues to run a program designed to help people who are addicted to narcotics.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, definitely get help.
Yep. Don't go chasing ghosts on morphine. That's probably the best takeaway.
Oh, I remember another story about Gram Parsons. I got to share this, y'all, because this is really cool. He signed the guest book.
Wow.
Oh, he signed the guest book?
Yeah. Yeah. Years later. That's just crazy. I mean, it could be, but it was his handwriting.
Sure.
That's what's crazy. Nowadays in my life, nothing's crazy, honestly. I mean, I'm just so...
Yeah, the more we continue to look at the Mojave, and the more we're looking at these mysteries, it's people going missing, people wandering off somewhere. Look, I mean, the truth of the matter is people shouldn't be wandering around in the desert, first of all. Definitely not today, but...
Definitely not Death Valley.
Definitely not Death Valley, you guys. There's something bigger out there than pack rats, and it might be the Yucca Man.
Yeah, well, I mean, people die in Death Valley every day. Their cars break down from overheating, and they try to walk, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. So there's all those. Then you got all the cartel mafia bodies buried out there near Vegas. Anyway, so wow. Well, that was a fun exploration, guys. Man, I really enjoyed that. It was great.
Yeah.
Doing these rabbit trails and just chatting.
Something else we should probably mention is if people want early access to episodes, you've got a membership program, don't you?
Yes. We have a sponsorship program, and they get early access, the members portal. We're setting up a Discord, and you can also go to Unrefined Friends in Facebook and join that private group. There's a lot of good things, good discussions going on there. And also do this, give us a rating on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcast.
Yeah, we do a lot of shows that are just members only, where it's just us talking about things that we think are important. We wrapped up a series on logical fallacies. We'll probably do another really good series about something intellectual.
Yeah, and we got a good one that the three of us did together a little while back. I think we're going to put in there. So check it out, y'all.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks for listening and supporting us. And remember, stay naturally supernatural.